Welcome to Conversations in Mind. This is a space for conscious inquiry, where metaphysics, new thought, and the science of mind meet real life. In a world calling for deeper awareness, we explore the nature of consciousness, the power of thought, and the presence of spirit moving through everyday experience. And now, here are your hosts, Barb Bue and Mark Gilbert.
Hello, conscious people. We're here once again to welcome you and ask you, what if your mind is more than just a collection of thoughts? What if it is the gateway to a whole new way of living? Thank you for joining us in Conversations in Mind. I'm Reverend Barbara, and I'm joined by my friend and fellow minister, Reverend Mark Gilbert. We are here seeking to demystify the study of new thought and dive deep into the science and soul of consciousness. So if you're a longtime seeker or you're curious about the power of your own perspective, we are going to dive into mind. And today, we've decided to dive into our own journeys a little bit, which we've shared bits of in the midst of everything else. How can you not, right? Mm-hmm. But, the turning points in our own spiritual growth and advice we would give our younger selves, which I'm guessing will be the question after the break. So, So, Mark, have you had any turning points in your life? Oh my God!
Yeah.
As the spiral unravels and ravels and unravels and ravels.
I think anytime anybody has contemplated on their life, they can look back and see key points of roads traveled and roads not traveled, decisions you made where you took your life one way, and or by not making a decision, you didn't go a route that perhaps would have changed your life. So, there's changes that reflect paths we went and paths we didn't go. But and I think also there's a reflection, at least in my mind, that there's big turning points. I call them big because they really sort of like rocked my life in a different direction. But then there's others where I think it's almost like little trim tabs on a boat. They sort of nudge you a little bit.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Just a little tiny. But remind me, you've been in New Thought for what, 25, 30 years now? How long?
I first found New Thought back in the 1980s, the late 80s. So whatever that equates to mathematically. So yes, over 30 years.
Try not to think about the math of that right now, because that's kind of where I was. That's where I found it also. But I was young and kind of dipping in and out for a while. Plus, I lived in a place where just couldn't find it. So but.
I know.
Okay. So I'm stuck right now because I'm doing that math in my head, and it's a little bit terrifying. Because to me, 1985 was 20 years ago.
Yeah. It's just around the corner. I agree with you.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And I think anybody, it behooves us to do these exercises every once in a while, just to sort of see how, your life has sort of a pattern to it, that there's opportunities for you to look and see where life tends to be moving you in a general direction. So the very nature of stopping and drawing a timeline out and just sort of saying, well, where did I not go when I could have made a choice and didn't? And where did I go when I did? And where did life throw me events at me? And sort of see if and I think when I've done that, I've noticed that it tends to be moving me in a general direction, that there's a general movement towards more spiritual growth for me, more understanding, more compassion, more love. So that there is a general arc to all these changes in my life. And I don't know about you. Would you feel the same?
Yeah, completely. And, and even finding this to begin with, like, there was I found it by accident, in many ways by accident, I'm sure a lot of people, so I just have to wonder, it makes you wonder, like, it even goes back to that question, like, how much of our life is how we direct it, and how much of our life has some direction,
right?
That maybe we called in some other place or some other time zone, call it, because otherwise, how did this even happen?
Yeah. It doesn't seem logical in a lot of ways, to look at your life and see how you ended up. Yeah, I tend to look at this, and I think I just said this on a prior week, but I do believe we have free will and we can make choices.
Oh, yeah.
But I think there's like bumpers on the side, and Spirit or God or the One sort of says, "Okay, you've gone sort of like too far astream here. Let's nudge you back onto your path." And so
Kind of like the ones at the bowling alley, just sort of keeping you a little bit aimed towards the center pin. Yeah,
that's right. We put the bumpers up. You can't totally go into the gutters in life.
Yeah. Luckily, I mean, because how many times could I? I mean, that's an interesting metaphor, because how many times could it have gone all the way over the edge in ways that were not healthy?
Yeah.
But my younger life, I could have gone some very different ways in my life, and not I've never been a person who was inclined towards jail, I don't think, but I can see in my life places where I could have become a sort of a hard shell person.
Mm-hmm.
At one time I was going to join the military. I looked at being a cop. I think that along the way I could have become a very hard shell, taken my childhood, continued to hold that shell around myself, and chosen a career path that would have reinforced that.
Mm-hmm.
And things just didn't work that way. And I'm a person who, like, when I decided something, usually I could make it work out, right? Yeah. These two things, they did not work out. So I think there was some guardrails that I now really appreciate.
Yeah, when I've looked back at it, I think I might have just said this a moment ago, but there are some that are really big, big turning points in my life. And then there's some others, like what I said with the trim tab. There's some that are sort of smaller. And I think that some of the stuff with spiritual, finding new thought and all of the movements along the spiritual path, they've been sort of like not big life events. They've been like more trim tab direction. Look at this, turn this way, this kind of thing. If I was going to roll out like those moments in my life that had big impacts on me taking a look at my life or changing the direction I was going, they sort of roll into maybe 4 or 5. I wrote them down here to make sure I'd get them right. My first marriage and the birth of my 5 children, all of that, I think, sort of like redirected my life at a very young point. There was also then a decision early in my life to move away from the South where I was living, to move to Colorado, and that big cross-country move where I did, with a family of wife and 5 kids to a new location, really totally upended my life and caused chaos in large areas but took me into newness that I never would have gotten if I'd stayed where I was.
That's a cross-cultural move too. Like,
yeah, cross-cultural, and so the very nature of going from young guy who could have gone the single path for many years and no children, to having the responsibility of marriage and kids, moving across country. If I also look at that too, there's a divorce that came, the ultimate divorce of that marriage, because one of the things that gave me the process of the divorce and the conversations around that and the ending of it amicably came through a pain of a realization of things where I didn't look at life properly, where I had to make me reflect on being self-centered in my prior to that time, and to changing myself to being more caring, concerned for others, taking the needs of others into account. So there was this sort of soul-searching look at, well, how did I get to this point where we weren't looking at the needs of each other, and what could we have done to have fixed this? And taking the steps to fix it. The marriage still ended, but it changed me along the way to looking at it, well, I don't have to do everything that's simply for what I think it needs to be done, that I'm not always the one that has to be right. And I need to be asking, how would you like to do this? And what would be meaningful for you? And how would, joy in your life look? And it flipped me from being sort of egotistical in a lot of ways. I don't think I was narcissistic in any way, but I certainly can look back on it and see that I didn't always take the needs of others into account to the degree that I feel like I do now. And that was a major, major aha moment for me. And if I had not gone through that challenge in that relationship, it would have, I might not have learned that lesson. And then I think also after that was I had a dog that was just so meaningful to me that we had to put down after 14 years. And the whole pain and struggle and the grief, of learning the true meaning of grief through that process. And how, I didn't know grief until I, lost, that dog, which meant so much to me. And I've written about it on my website, so I won't go into the details. But it really changed me. And I think the other thing that was a major turning point for me was a letting go. I had the safety and security of a long time career with the federal government, and the very nature of letting go of that to jump into spiritual teachings and being a minister more fully in my life. I felt like I could be a minister in my role with the government, but the very fact of letting go of that safety blanket of that income and job and the title and all of that stuff was a major turning point for me as well. So, I can look at these, marriage and kids, moving across the country, the divorce, the loss of the job, and the loss of the dog. Those all had these major moments where Mark changed. Something big happened and Mark changed. And, if I go through the others, they're more smaller. They're smaller life events, but they also had an impact on me. There were, some of the smaller ones, just to throw some ideas out there and get your thoughts on this, is, I've had some mystical experiences along my life, and those little mystical experiences turned me into thinking, well, there's more to life than physical life. There's more to life than physical life. And it kept reminding me of that, which kept pushing me on the spiritual path. And then when I was in college, I took a class in the psychology of consciousness. And it opened me. This is what I want to know about, consciousness.
Right.
I want to understand consciousness, And then from there on out, there were all these spiritual teachers and books that came into my life at the right time in the right way and just sort of tweaked my life in a certain direction. And I can't say that they were big life moments, but they were all sort of like those bumpers pushing me along and say, oh, you want to understand metaphysics? Look at this, live this, So there's these things I think I can look back on and say, they've sort of like moved me, and big life events that said, you need to learn a lesson, damn it.
I call it the God smack. That's what I call it. which I thought I had learned to avoid until recently, But I thought I had learned to see that and go, oh, I need to shift before it hits, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then sometimes that's just not the case. So, also when I hear you, I'm like, you look at, so you were talking about your divorce and finding the place in you that began to care more about others. Like without that, would ministry have even been possible?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can see in my life, there were places where I might have found ministry, but it would not have been the same at all in terms of, and similar, for me, I was in my mid-20s and living and working in Washington, D.C. And I came back to Colorado for a long weekend with my mom or something. And she was like, you got to go to church with me. And I was like, yeah, no, because I grew up, I'm like you, I grew up very Christian. And then the fact that I am not heterosexual really threw all that out the window. And I went through being angry and then went through being sad and then went through all of the things of loss of that sort of that connection and believing for a long time that that because I did not fit into that church model, that I did not have God or a spiritual path, right? So anyway, my mother convinces me to go to church, turns out to be Mile High. And this was in the mid 80s. And they had and my friends I had friends who were dying of AIDS. The AIDS thing was real. And I walk in and there's a poster on the wall that says, you can hug me. I have AIDS. You can hug me and I won't make you sick. And I was like, totally kind of fell apart in the lobby. Right. And then, and this was such a turning point for me that I still remember. It was Dr. Fred, who I had no idea who he was or anything about this place. And he did a talk on the metaphysics of the Lord's Prayer. And I was like, I had been searching other things. I had tried out Wiccan. I had tried out some Native American things, loved the ritual, loved the richness, could not work it in my head and my heart, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I was like, well, this finally makes sense, right? And then I
Mhm.
went back to DC, and of course, there was no internet or any way to like, there was no Mile High Church in the phone book, right? So, and I like to say I was fully living my 20s. So, and I was working a lot because that's been my pattern. And so I just did that. But then I ended up moving back to Denver. My dad was sick. He had cancer, and I ended up coming back to Colorado, transferring back here with FedEx and for like a year and a half, and dabbled, in and out of Mile High a little bit. And then FedEx moved me to LA into a management position. And I found Huntington Beach Church, which was a big one in the movement for a long time. And Roger was there. Roger Teal was there. Like there was this overlap at Huntington Beach for a little bit. Michelle Madrano was there. I had foundations from her like 1,000 years ago. But anyway, though all those things sort of, and then I'd take a class and people like, you should be a practitioner. And I'd be like, no, I got to go. And I would run away from that completely. But similar thing. Then I just kept doing the classes and finding the unfolding, and like things would fall. Some of my like turning experiences were around books.
Mhm.
I remember being in a bookstore with friends in Portland, Oregon, and meandering around and literally having a copy of Conversations with God fall off the shelf into my hands. And I sat there reading it for an hour while I was waiting for them,
Mhm.
and and same with oh God, it's green. I'm not going to remember the name of it all of a sudden. And
Philistine
then
prophecy.
Celestine Prophecy, that was the other one, right? Like that one really, I mean, I know I should go back and read that again. It's probably really like 101 right now, right? Or even not that, but still there was
You might
something
get
about
something
it.
out of it. You never know.
And Illusions is a book I've gone back to 1,000 times.
Mhm.
And because I'm waiting to be able to walk through water, or walk through a wall. But so same thing. Relationship surprise. In the middle of prac school, life completely falls apart. And what happened for me was in the grieving, a inability to be with people who cry.
Mhm.
I didn't have that ability in I could not sit with people who were crying. It made me like just want to run out of the room, literally. And in that whole thing, I became a person who can be with people who cry.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty sure I could not have done ministry without that skill,
Mhm.
without that ability, and the deepening that goes along with that, and the compassion and the understanding, and the deeper connection with this understanding that all will be well. Like, which of course we all have to be reminded of when we get in the midst of things, which, for a year and a half ago, I had another relationship surprise divorce that really threw me again. And part of that was that I had really removed myself in many ways from my own spiritual practice and my own connection in my time working at CSL home office. And even probably later in the later parts of ministry here in Northern Colorado, it becomes so much about the business of church. It does. I began to lose the spirituality of church in
Mhm.
the stress and the constant. There was a lot that happened at CSL in those years, as in every time period in CSL that anybody that's worked there can say a lot happened in the years that I worked there, right? It's
Right.
just the nature of it all. And and I had really removed myself from that in many ways and kind of went, okay, this is done. And when I thought I retired uh, almost 2 years ago now, and then got the surprise of my life and upended everything again, like that was the thing that called me back. It was like you've really not been present in your own spiritual journey, and
Mhm.
so the healing and the grief of the last year and a half has also been about reconnecting and and reigniting that connection in a way that is profoundly real and a whole new level.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that was a lot. Um, Sorry, a little rambly probably, but that was a lot. And, but I don't know anybody who gets here the easy way.
Yeah, that's true. I think that, we can look at like basic Buddhist precept is that, we life is suffering, because we become attached to our beliefs and our lives and certain expectations of how things should be. And I've come to really believe that we can transcend those uh, attachments, but life sort of throws us events to continuously test us into learning the lessons we need to move forward and letting go of those things that are no longer serving us. And a lot of that is those small thinking, the beliefs about our lives that weren't serving us. It's like when I became an adult, I had modeled my father was such a responsible person that I really felt like when I had, marriage and kids at an early age, that I had to be a responsible person, which meant get a job and make money and support your kids and make sure everybody is raised to the complete degree of success. So there was this picture in my mind of what a man's role was in terms of developing this family. And I think to a degree that served me for many, many years, but it also limited me. It limited me from seeing the possibilities of other things and other ways that I could be. And it also blinded me I was so driven by the nature of what that perfect family and the expectation of delivering these children into adulthood with, as successful adults look like, that it denied aspects in myself. It denied aspects in my first wife, and it incomplete. I held on to degrees of limitations and incompleteness in myself that I could only see by the challenges that came later. Ultimately, I have to say, if I fast forward and I look back on it, my first wife and I are really good friends. My wife Mary and I, we came together, and she liked to say that she wished she had met me when I was earlier. My joke back to her was, I was not the person you would have wanted back then, because I had to go through the learning experiences to prepare myself for a conscious relationship. And that conscious relationship, then to attract the right person for my life, has blossomed into this sort of like melded family of I'm good friends with my ex and her husband, to Mary and I are, and we do things together. We have joint vacations with all of the kids and grandkids. We have ongoing, text strings on our phones where, we can support. We have the support network that's come out of that is very deep and broad. Yet it only came because everybody went through the learning. I can speak to myself to it, but I had to prepare myself and go through those experiences so that I could be the person that could create a conscious relationship with Mary, and here we are, celebrating 20 years of marriage this year.
Are you already? Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I knew you when you guys started seeing each other.
Yes,
These things cannot be 20 years ago.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
We've been together over 20 years, and the marriage will be is 20 years next month.
Because you started seeing her when we were in ministerial school, as I recall.
It was, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. After I had gotten divorced and dated some other women. And,
I remember that. I remember this.
Yeah. So
you were very glowy, as I recall.
and it's been a real gift and real blessing, but it also, I can look back on it and see that the blessings that have all occurred through that and the person that I've become is a product of all of it. It's not only my relationship with Mary, but it's a relationship with my first wife and the raising of the children and the going through the career and the feeling that I had to be successful and deliver the children into adulthood as successful adults, et cetera. All of that was a necessary step for the journey of Mark, while simultaneously was all that, like you were talking about finding Mile High. That's how I found the New Thought as well, back in the 1980s. But I really found spirituality through first a rebellion against the religion of my youth, feeling like it wasn't where I felt fed spiritually, and looking and then searching, and searching meant metaphysical bookstores and books that I read and didn't totally understand at the first reading.
But there's something about them, right? Like, I don't know what this life is, but there's something about this.
Yes, yeah, and it's almost like I was drawn to a model of a life that I couldn't quite describe it, but I knew there were certain pieces to it, that certain lifestyles, vegetarian for many years, because I knew that was part of it. It's like, go to metaphysical bookstores, go to these, places that were, hippie-ish, for lack of a better word, that were attractive to me, so that because they sort of were the puzzle pieces to something I was seeking. And what I've really come to understand is they were all like puzzle pieces to putting me on the spiritual path of understanding a greater truth, that it's not the old religion of my youth. It's not scientific materialism. There is a blossoming of understanding of a metaphysical universe where science and spirituality come together, where there's a non-duality of life, that we live in a oneness. All of this was directing me in that. And books and finding New Thought was simply, I was on a plane one day with a guy, and I was reading some book, a spiritual book. It was Matthew Fox or somebody like that. And he was reading another book by somebody else that was very comparable. And he said, well, if you like that book, you'd like this church. And so my family went with them to Mile High back in the 1980s. And I didn't really jump into the classes until the 1990s. And only then, because I was always fascinated by consciousness. And the ministerial program was called the Masters in Consciousness Studies at the time. And I thought, and all the classes sounded like, this is what I wanted to learn about. This is what I wanted to learn about. And, and it was a bridge. It was a true bridge to, getting into taking the classes and becoming a practitioner and then eventually a minister. But all of that was to get that degree and understand consciousness better. And it's, I could have gone another path. It was consciousness in the material world, but I recognized from my days in college back many, many years ago, and my undergraduate degree, that the psychology was so delved into materialism that it wasn't the understanding of consciousness that I was looking for. And it took me to the spiritual path to really find what was next for me in that spiritual realm.
Yeah. For me, I didn't want to be a practitioner. I didn't want to be a minister. I was really resistant to that, but I wanted to keep taking the classes.
Yes.
I wanted to continue the education. And then it was like, well, here I am, right? I'm in this, I guess I'm going to be a practitioner. Like, that's kind of, and then in the middle of practitioner training, I was like, I remember looking at my mentor / old minister, Kristen Hawkins, and I was like, I have to go to ministerial school, don't I? And she would just laugh the whole time. But, but so much of that was about not just as my life paralleled what or tracked along with the things I was absorbing by being in all of these classes. It was not about gaining the material. It was not, all that was lovely and somewhat part of the journey, because that just in my experience, that just became simpler in many ways. But also then stripping all that away and becoming and learning faith, that I can trust this universe, that it does actually hold me in a way that is good and good for me and good and directed towards my unfoldment. as a person with a deeper faith and a deeper trust and a deeper understanding of what that means.
Yeah, my path was very comparable, Barb, in the sense that, I looked at the training for the ministerial program and the consciousness studies classes, and that's what I wanted. And it said, okay, you got to be a practitioner to get into that.
Right.
So I took the classes and became a practitioner simply to go to ministerial school. So I was a little bit, flipped there from you, but I will say practitioner class changed my life, because for those of you who have ever done it, that much of the class is making you go back and look at various areas of your life and hold them up to the light about your beliefs about anything from money, death and dying, relationships, et cetera, et cetera. Every little area of your life, you had to say, what do you really truly believe about this? And why do you believe that? And what's a higher possibility for you to believe in terms of this? And it made me look at every area of my life, and it changed me. It changed my outlook on life, and recognize from being, as we've talked about many weeks, I think I had that sort of victim consciousness. I was rolling along, and it made me realize I could create my life. I could create the life I wanted. I'm at choice in the life and the things that I want to believe about life. And I think up to that point, I didn't really recognize that totally, or I didn't embody it. And so I think that, coupled with the learning that I had false beliefs about, caring about, the needs of others, and approaching a relationship from a conscious standpoint, where you're trying to create something that is bigger than just your needs met. There's the other person's needs met, and then there's the relationship's needs met. That whole thing that shifted me, so that relationship became a different aspect of life. It became part of a spiritual aspect of life, as well as rather than just something that you did because it was expected of you to get married and have kids or whatever.
Yeah, no, I went to prac school because it would get me through, because of that. Same thing. I applied to ministerial school halfway through prac school, because I just knew I didn't want to be a practitioner. In fact, I even told Kirsten one time, I'll go to ministerial school if you can make it so I can skip that whole practitioner thing. Because some part of me knew that life was going to come apart in that time. But what's that old quote? You have to let go of the life that you thought you had to have the life that you really want, moves you, expands you, and that's what happened in prac training for me. I thought my life fell apart, really. And the material part of my life did fall apart. The spiritual part of my life woke up.
Yeah.
At a deeper and deeper level.
Yeah. And I think this whole process of going through and looking at these points in your life where you made choices or non-choices, or life sort of guided you along, it made me realize that life was always there for me, moving me in the direction that I needed to move. And even if I wasn't consciously aware of it, the very nature that the prac class and ultimately into ministerial class made me realize that life was guiding me for my own good, that it gave me choices, but it also was opening me to the higher possibilities of what my life could be. And it let me recognize how I had limited it by the fact that I sort of walked through lots of life and was now doing it more consciously. I won't say I'm 100% conscious, because I continue to grow every day. I continue to have things that are pushing me in new directions, and say, even this podcast that we're doing and these conversations that we're having, I think we're divinely guided for me to say, here's what's next for you that you need to do to continue focusing in the direction that's best for you. And to serve your life, and you to be in service to others, to the one.
Yeah, I do think that that now that we've talked about it a little bit, we should say we are going to do a podcast on conscious relationship coming up shortly too. So, yeah. I think we need to take a break. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
We need to support. We would like to ask you. We would like to ask you to support the New Thought Media Network. If you would just take a moment to listen to this little bit about that.
We hope you're enjoying Conversations in Mind. This program is made possible by the New Thought Media Network, a nonprofit that's supporting conscious, spiritual media. If you'd like to support this work, just scan the QR code to make a donation. It lets the network know you like this show and helps them to continue bringing you this type of content. You can also go to ntmedia.org and click on Donate. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Now, back to the show.
Thanks for that. Please, if you didn't catch the QR code, you can back up this recording, and if you use that QR code, it also lets New Thought Media Network know that you watched this program and enjoy this program. So appreciate your support around that. Please click like, comment, make comments, ask questions. We're always looking to engage. So we don't have a lot of time left. So
We got another question to go.
what advice would you give your younger self? If you had one nugget, what would it be?
Oh, one nugget. Oh, come on.
But you had 5 written down.
I've got a scroll here. It was like one of the things I got from my dad that I had a challenge when I was young, and this stuck with me. He sat me down at a moment in my life, and I was like in grade school, and he told me, "Mark, things always have a way of working out."
Wow.
And that's sort of like carried me through my life, that message from my dad, who didn't often impart words like that to me, but he wanted me to see that when I was feeling down in that moment, that things always work out. Things work out. And I think this, going back and looking at the timeline of your life and the major points that have changed you on the spiritual path, shows evidence of it to me. It shows me that life was always for me. Life is, even in the moments of the bleakest times, where I was the most depressed or down, or things weren't going on what I wanted, when a little time and distance from that event let me look back and see the gift that it was giving me. So life is constantly giving you gifts, and things are always working out, would be the one nugget that I would tell my younger self to always focus on. But I think I did do that to a degree. I think I always did sort of like look at it from that standpoint. But if I could look at it at another way, one other thing I would tell, the bonus point for my youth is always look at what's for the greatest good for everybody, not just yourself.
Yeah.
Don't just be meeting your needs, but consider the needs of others. How can life work out not only for you, but for those around you and everyone? And it opens your eyes to seeing that you're connected to everyone around you. And life isn't about just my life as Mark working out, but looking at the lives of the entities around me, the people around me, and saying, how can I serve to make everyone's life work out? What can I do that can serve the common good? I think to a degree that I did that in many ways, but I know there's areas where I didn't, where I was selfish, and I would want my youthful self to remember that. What about you, Barb?
There's a couple of things. I think one, I would tell myself that regardless of circumstances, that the universe is a safe place and you're going to be okay. And somehow impart the wisdom that I did not need to make decisions out of fear or self-protection.
Mm-hmm.
And that you are not alone and no one is alone. And also then to impart the wisdom of you don't need to chase or make decisions out of this place of loneliness or feeling so alone in the world. So for myself, those things. For the rest of it, I think I would have wanted an earlier, more expansive worldview of what other people deal with and live with in the United States and the world. Our education here is so U.S. centric and white centric, and I would have wanted to know more earlier about all of that and potentially chosen avenues of work that would have made what I feel like a bigger impact in that part of the world, or in those aspects of the world, politically or socially, or what, those things. So the universe landed me in places where I could have done more with what, if had I known more.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. That's a double barreled thing. I look at that and say, I wish I had the wisdom, when I was younger that I have now, to the degree that I'm wise now. And I recognize all the things, and it's interesting to look back at your life and go, I was so clueless then.
Right.
And I at least sort of have a clue now.
This much of a clue. Yeah. I know. It's like I want the strength and the body and the ability to do a lot of things that I had when I was 25 and 30, with the wisdom that I have now, and then some. Yeah.
And I think the one biggest limitation that I had was probably thinking about the opinions of others and limiting myself by, and I would probably, this is sort of a corollary to what we've already said, but it's, I think specifically so many times we say, I can't do this because others will judge me, or what will they think? Or they think I am not smart enough. I'm not attractive enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm not whatever. And all those times that I put those sort of limits on myself, created that limit in my life.
Yeah.
And it takes understanding that let go of what people think about and live your life. Your life is really about joy. It's about enjoying this journey that we're on, learning the lessons of it, and don't limit yourself by worrying about the good opinions of others. Let them decide. Their judgments are more about them than they are about you. And that took a long time to really sort of learn that.
Well, and to couple that with finding, I don't know about you, but finding a spiritual path that was so outside the box back when I found it, right? Like,
Yep.
So even sort of holding that in and not wanting to share it because it made me just so weird to people, because I don't know, I was just worried about what people think way too much,
Yeah.
And I could have taken this into a lot bigger place. I could have taken this into other places had I embraced that weirdness for myself.
No, I get it totally.
It's really like I had this very corporate, like you, I had this very corporate job, and then I'm doing all this other thing on the outside of it, and it was very not in alignment with each other in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's why I eventually retired. I felt like I had the freedom in the job that I had with the government to bring a lot of my spiritual beliefs into it. I could couch them in the realm of positive thinking and things of that nature, but I couldn't get into the more esoteric aspects of it because then it would be too woo-woo for people. And I recognized that at some point, if I was going to be true to myself, I really had to let go of an environment where the expectations of the jobs and positions were such that I couldn't truly be who I was relative to my spiritual beliefs. And I would look back on my life, and on the one hand, and what I started to get into a moment ago is that I really think that all of the experiences that I had, they truly served me to where I am now.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't change a thing on some level.
Right.
Because they brought me to who I am. But at the same time, there is a sort of like gee, I wish I knew this earlier kind of thing.
I wish I'd have been who I am earlier. Yes.
In that, I would have recognized my metaphysical beliefs and brought them to light more. I would have let them be more of who I was in the world, and be open to it. I think that there was a inner resistance in me that I had to go through. I wanted to fit in so much that I also had to be somewhat scientific, materialistic, rational. And sometimes a person who puts on the moniker of I'm a rationalist, objective person means they don't accept something that is beyond the physical. And I felt like I limited myself by feeling judgment by people who, and to this day, I had to, recognize that what we truly believe is a universe that is more than just the physical life. We've talked about this almost every week. Yeah. Yet we bounce into a culture that bounces back at it and says, no, only physical stuff is real. And, and I had to overcome the beliefs of others in that area so that I could be myself, because I identified so much with the rational, scientific thought process with people. It was all around me.
Yeah, I've needed to balance out my desire for a comfortable life materially with also knowing that it's not all about that. And I still want that. I mean, I have that, and I'm not giving that up.
Yeah. And a corollary to that
just to be clear out there in the world.
We also received messages that said you can't be who you are and make a living. That there are these things that if you're truly true to yourself, most of those things, how can you be artistic or musical or whatever, the spiritual ministerial role, you can't be successful at that and have a living. And, those are limiting beliefs as well that we need to learn to let go of.
Luckily for me, I have none of those talents. So I didn't have to make that choice. My talents have all been in these spreadsheets / run a business / do these things. So for me, it's been balancing that out with how do I use those things to serve the world and use those skills to serve the world instead of just using those skills to gain for myself.
So Barb, what's one takeaway you've got from today's conversation that maybe we could share a nugget here and close this up?
I would say it would be, especially for someone who is new to this or younger or really seeking, to trust your instincts and your internal guidance, and it really does. It does work. All these things work to make life more fulfilling and more joyful and more complete, I guess,
Beautiful. I'll just agree with that and say that life has a way of working out. And if we trust in spirit, God, the one to navigate you along in a path that is for your greatest good.
Yeah. Listen, right?
Listen and cooperate.
Resistance is futile. That might be my other nugget.
So thanks everybody for listening in today. We hope you benefit from it. And again, like and subscribe, and also drop us a comment and suggestions for future topics. And we appreciate you viewing and listening and supporting us these many weeks now. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.